I always wanted to make a target using 4x4s with the end grain sticking out. And I saw this video on YouTube. It was like the Russians and their knife throwing targets. And they don't have any backboard. It looks like it's all pressure fit. There's no real instructions on how to make it. We're going to cut these 4x4s using my husband's table saw, but he's not comfortable taking off all the guards.
Too pain in the ass to take off the guards.
I thought you're scared.
I'm not scared.
Whatever. He can't do it. So he's gonna make me slave away in the 88-degree Florida heat. Let's talk about how properly cut a 4x4 with a saw. Basically, I need my blocks to be flush with the 2x4. So I need this 4x4 block to be flush with the 2x4 block, but the 4 inches is not actually 4 inches, it's 3.5 inches. Just make 3.5-inch blocks. And then the key with the saw is that you actually aren't applying any pressure. Let the saw do all the work. I've been cutting these 4x4s for the last 2 hours, and along the way I realized all my cuts were coming out janky, for lack of a better word. So here are my tips on how to cut 4x4s as straight as they can be. Using a speed square, make a 3.5-inch measurement on 2 sides of the 4x4. Along the vertical line, clamp a scrap piece of wood to guide your saw. Looking back, I should have made a jig that was 3.5 inches long. That way I wouldn't need to constantly measure or perfectly line up the scrap wood. To start off your sawing, dig the saw into the line carefully on the corner. Apply pressure on the upstroke of the saw. Use a guide to help keep your saw straight. Then start moving the saw lightly back and forth, applying a very slight amount of pressure towards the nose of the saw. If you start to muscle it, this is what your sawing will look like. It's very inefficient and tiresome. Each block took me between 5 to 7 minutes to complete. Day 1, it took me 4 hours to cut one 8-foot 4x4 into 27 pieces. Day 2, I was much more efficient. It took me 2.5 hours to cut the second 8-foot 4x4. I believe if you use the tips I provide and don't videotape, it should take between 4 to 5 hours to saw your blocks, maybe even faster if you build a jig beforehand. By the time I was done, I had 54 blocks total. Since I only needed 49, I got rid of the 5 blocks that looked the worst. Now the next step is to cut the 2x4s. If you don't have a tree or a stand to place this target, then you should leave the 2x4s long, and those can become the legs of your target stand. Since I have a stand to attach my target, we cut out 2 33-inch length pieces using our table saw. For the top of the 2x4s, I marked a spot that was 3 3/8 inches in and 1 3/4 inches to the middle. Then, using a 5/8 inch drill bit, I drilled a hole for a 5/8 inch threaded rod. Yeah! Check that out! I did the same thing to the top of the second 2x4. For the bottom of the 2x4s, I marked a spot that was 4 3/8 inches in and 1 3/4 inches to the middle. Then I drilled another hole using the 5/8 inch drill bit. I did the same to the bottom of the second 2x4. Before I continue, there is an essential step that I must mention. That is, use wood glue between all the blocks. Initially, I didn't use wood glue, and this didn't fare well for my spin throws. If you don't want to use wood glue, you can nail a backboard to the frame of the target. In any case, be sure to watch my next video to see how well wood glue works. Next, we threaded the rods through the holes. The bottom rod was a tight fit, so be sure your measurements are correct. Then we tightened up the frame by placing a flat washer, then a split lock washer, and lastly a hex nut on the ends of the threaded rods. Make sure to tighten up the hex nuts using a crescent wrench. It's day 3 of this project, and I'm on my very last step, which is taking my target and affixing it to my stand. My friend Christian made me the stand, and I've had it for years. He gave it to me as a present to replace the really ghetto stand I had. It was a ladder wrapped in white belts with a target in front. It was just bad. This you might not be able to do, but I'm just going to show you this, what I'm doing. This target was working alright for when I was no spin throwing with 10-inch knives. All I did was use a little hammer to knock the blocks back in place. So I thought I needed to go back to that Russian YouTube channel that has these targets and see what it is that's holding this all together, because it's not just pressure fit, it's something else.